And I think, like, it ties the storyline of the Deathless Mother for Fringilla very well, like, especially the continual references to Fringilla's power or lack of power that we've seen throughout the series and throughout the season specifically. I think, like, Cahir references it, Francesca references it, her uncle references it, the
Yennefer.
Nilfgaardian Guard, Yennefer, everybody keeps telling her that she doesn't have power. She's like, "I don't need power, I need faith. I have faith, I have faith." Um, and then suddenly it's not, "Oh, that little bit of ambition we heard at the end of, episode 2 or whatever." That's we see that, I think, in full force by the end of this episode.
Welcome to The Story Tinker, a Webtoons and Witcher podcast for superfans with scene-by-scene analysis. Featuring sharp co-hosts for a fuller picture, we dive deep into character psychology, relationships, and theories. We'd love it if you could like, subscribe, comment, and rate us on all podcast platforms and social media. For bonus content, you can support The Story Tinker on Patreon. Let's begin.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of our Witcher coverage. This episode is Voleth Meir, and today we have a special guest that I'm very excited about. We have Alyssa from Breakfast in Beauclair. I love that one of your Polish guests says it like Beauclair, and I love how he says it.
It's so cute.
Yeah. So, Alyssa, take it away and tell us all about your Witcher stuff that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Alyssa. I'm the host and producer of Breakfast in Beauclair, which is a global Witcher podcast. It's been around for about 2.5 years and really focuses on the books and the Netflix show with guests from all over the world. So I've really had the absolute pleasure of building up a global community, mostly around the US and the Americas and Europe. And it's been so much fun having this platform to discuss The Witcher with all of these different perspectives, especially because it's like a really pan-European series. So it's been really awesome. That's what I do, and yeah, that's really it.
Yeah, I've been listening to your podcast and really enjoying them. I listen when I'm like exercising, so it's fun. That's what my pleasure time. I can relax and listen to fun stuff.
Yeah. I can't imagine my voice being really great for exercise, but I say that as someone who used to exercise to Adele a lot, so I don't know if I should be one to talk.
Your voice is very soothing and calming to me, but it doesn't make me fall asleep at the gym, so don't worry.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm excited. And then you've read all the books, right?
Yes, so I've read the books multiple times. I think with the exception of Season of Storms, which I think I've read exactly once. But for the majority of the books I have read multiple times, and and then I played The Witcher 3 a little bit when it came out around 2015. So yeah, I'm very entrenched in the Witcherverse, Witcher lore, everything.
That's awesome. I haven't played The Witcher, but that's because I probably haven't touched a computer game since I was like 12. So,
Yeah.
but honestly, I've never been interested in doing that, even though my husband like plays a little bit or used to play. But Witcher 3 is the only thing I would consider playing.
Yeah.
I've heard it does spoil things, so I don't know if I should play it.
I think some of the biggest spoilers are things that have already been revealed in the Netflix show. Yes, that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Okay.
But I think some of the biggest things are definitely already kind of in the Netflix show, at least the biggest thing that comes to mind. However, it does do a really nice job of continuing the story past where the books end. So.
Okay. All right. So yeah. So I guess we'll try not to spoil things from the books, but maybe we can discuss like the character differences as long as it's not spoiling events. All right, so let's get started. So again, we're organized by storyline. So we'll start with just a little bit of 𝘕𝘰𝘓, what's going on with 𝘕𝘰𝘓. So Vizimir, King Vizimir of Redania, is playing cards because his character is like this, I don't know, very immature kind of guy.
Yeah.
Is he like that in the books too?
We actually don't see a lot of King Vizimir of Redania in the series. Like a little bit here and there, but like not too much. We don't spend a lot of time with him specifically. We do, however, spend quite a bit of time with 𝘕𝘰𝘓. So it's really nice. I think the characterization of 𝘕𝘰𝘓 is more or less like spot on. He's just a little more cartoonish, I feel like, in the books. Whereas obviously you have Graham McTavish, who is just a mighty muscular force in this series. But the dynamic between 𝘕𝘰𝘵𝘕 and King Vizimir is really interesting just because it feels like there's a certain level of, I don't want to say incompetence, but almost like disregard or uncertainty about like, 𝘕𝘰𝘵's gonna 𝘕𝘰𝘵, so I can just relax. I can do whatever I need to do. Which, I think when you have someone as competent as 𝘕𝘰𝘵 under you, maybe you can make that, but that's also a bit of a gamble, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Like, would he be a little bit more responsible and care more about, being active, taking an active role if his advisor wasn't as capable, or is he just, frivolous and uncaring in general?
Yeah, I have no idea. But I think it's something that will be interesting to explore. I think we get I think like a handful of scenes with Vizimir throughout the series. I think we get our first hint of him in episode 3, I believe, What is Lost, when they're at the memorial for Sodden, and then bits here and there when 𝘕𝘰𝘵 enters, and then now. But yeah, I think frivolous is a really good way to describe Vizimir's characterization in the series.
Yeah. So they're having some political discussion, and they discuss how Ciri is the rightful heir to Cintra, which of course everyone now wants to marry her. And they talk about, he says how Tissaia knows of the girl, but she's not telling Vilgefortz, but she lets her relationships cloud her judgment. So that's kind of a little bit of a clue, I think, to something that we discover a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But I found it interesting. Like, he's a very careful observer of people and their relationships. So most people probably recognize and see Tissaia as a very stern person and very, rigid. But he immediately recognizes that her relationship, for example, with Yennefer or with Vilgefortz is something that affects her and where she has like a weakness.
Yeah. I think the most important thing to know about 𝘕𝘰𝘵 in general is that he is basically a master of spies. If you're familiar with Game of Thrones, he basically acts as I just said that reference, now I'm completely forgetting his name. Viserys? No,
Okay.
That's not right. Is it right?
I haven't seen Game of Thrones.
Okay.
I know some names.
Daenerys has like no, I guess briefly he becomes her right-hand man at some point, but he's like the master of like secrets and the master of whisperers and things like that. I haven't totally watched all of Game of Thrones, so forgive me. But 𝘕𝘰𝘵𝘵 is very much like that. He has all of these people feeding him information, and then he's the person who decides what to do with it. In the books, they often describe him as like the exact opposite of what a spy would look like. So he's a very large, obvious man, unlike small rat-like spies that you would normally see in like medieval literature. So he's a large man. They often, at least in the English translation, they often say like he's got 2 cachalots over a whale, like, and all of them are whales. So he's a very big man. And you can't go and like, but at the same time, one of the quotes from the books, it's like, if 𝘕𝘰𝘵 says it's day, but darkness reigns all around, like you start worrying about the fate of the sun. Like, this is a very capable and terrifying man. And yeah, it's he's been fed all these things, and he's the one that's at the top making decisions. So you kind of wonder where he's getting his information and who from, I think, as you're watching this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, and then there's obviously one in the last episode, but we're not going to do that because that's episode 8. But one thing I found interesting was that, so Vizimir is annoyed because he's like, I pay you to solve problems, not to fill my head with bad news. And, 𝘕𝘰𝘵 tries to reassure him. He's like, oh, we have many more irons in the fire. So I found it interesting because on the one hand, 𝘕𝘰𝘵 is clearly more capable and intelligent than Vizimir and more powerful, but then because Vizimir has like the positional power just because of his birth, he, in a sense, can rule over 𝘕𝘰𝘵, even though 𝘕𝘰𝘵 is the one who is more powerful as a person and as a character. There's an interesting like back and forth between them.
Yeah. I feel like, yeah, you're right. It's the figurehead versus the actor, provocateur, whatever you want to call 𝘕𝘰𝘵 in this situation. But 𝘕𝘰𝘵 is the one who's actually making things happen in Redania, for sure. And I think we see that in their dynamic here.
Yeah, I think in school, at least, we had an organizational here, it's called like there's different types of power. So one of them is expert power, which 𝘕𝘰𝘵 has because he's an expert, and then positional power, which is literally just your position. So, and the strengths that come with that. So anyway, so now let's talk a little about Rience and what happens with him in this episode. So he is talking with Lydia, and he says that he was aided because he had no strength to open the portal, which is interesting because, I don't think it's been quite explain how much strength you need to make a portal and how taxing it is. Like we've seen Yennefer in season 1, you know, her energy sapped as she makes portal after portal, which is running away from the assassin. But it's interesting to see Rience. Like I love the way the actor does it. He's like embarrassed and ashamed. He's like, I couldn't open the portal.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious who helped him though. Who helped him open it up? Is this the spoiler?
This is my spoiler face. I'm just like, how do I go about this?
Okay,
in terms of characterization, though, I can talk about characterization here without giving away any spoilers. Rience is the character that I love to hate because he's so dumb in the books. He's an utter moron in the books, and they made him so scary, so capable, so threatening, and so powerful in the series. So especially when you first see Chris Fulton and he's slathered in oil and he's shirtless and ripped, and I'm like, why is this happening? I had to pause, walk away, and come back, and I was like, no. Not that I'm upset about anything that they did, just that I was just like, I was prepared. I was so prepared to like just hate this guy for being an utter dunce. And he's genuinely terrifying in the series. So yeah, Rience is a character that every time he attempts something in the books, it just goes horribly wrong for him all of the time. So that being said, it's interesting that they still kept some of that loss of power or the inability, and that he says, like, I was either too weak or incapable of opening a portal at the time that he was fighting Geralt. And even though the scenario is different from what happens in the books, that part is still true. So he still does have trouble in that moment when he's fighting Geralt, you know, opening a portal, and he does get external help. So it's interesting to see, like, you're not very surprised in the books that he needs help in order to do that because he's a little dumb. In the series, however, that admission is a little surprising because he seems so capable. So
interesting. That's cool. Yeah, I didn't know that that's how he was portrayed in the books, but I love his character here because he, like you said, is genuinely frightening. And more what happens at the end. I mean, you see, like he seems like a psychopathic, but we'll get to that in a bit. So he tells Lydia he wants to meet her boss, and you know she's like, well, he didn't show up, and he's like, no, I don't think you have as much sway with him as you imagine you do.
Yeah,
it's part of the plan. So you know he's doubting her closeness with the boss, and now they try to do a test to see like blood tracing on the vial that he got. They have some funny lines how her test subject's technically dead. Which tells you a little bit about the lifestyle that she leads.
Yeah.
And now she rubs it on her hands, puts it, like, smells it on her face, and it burns her face off. And while she's yelling, Rience looks at her with like this really, really creepy, like semi-grin. He's just like, this is where I think he's like a psychopath. Like he does not have any empathy for her at all. And he has pleasure in her being brought down because she was nasty to him.
In fact, he even leans in, like his body, he sits there and watches this with like a certain amount of satisfaction, which is nuts, quite frankly. And yeah, Lydia is also a super interesting character in the course of this season, and I do quite like what they did with her character and how they gave her a lot more, I think, to work with, just because she's a more diminutive character in the books. So I do like that she has, I guess, agency, a certain level of agency, even though she has apparently someone, like someone over her shoulder, a patron over her shoulder who's having her do these things and subcontract Rience and everything. But at the same time, it's really interesting to see what happens. And now you make the assumption that, like, did he switch the vial? Or is this something that 𝘬𝘪𝘵𝘪 really did?
I didn't even think of that, which is why I would make a terrible spy, because I would like, it didn't even occur to me that he could like do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because then you wonder, like, did he plan this? Because it seemed very easy. He was just like, you know what, I will give it to you. And then suddenly she's very interested and very invested. So I feel like he definitely could have planted that. So
then he has the vial to do whatever he wants to.
Potentially.
Potentially. Cool. Okay. In theory. or you just know something that I don't, that you're like.
This is an entirely new storyline, so your guess is as good as mine.
Right. Interesting. Cool. I like what you said about Lydia, because I did hear from, fans. Like I said, I've been trying to avoid spoilers, but I do engage in, reading what people say. And a lot of people have said that the characters, a lot of them are developed a lot more in the TV series, which I think is great. You have more character, more personality, more backstory. I think sometimes people think they might have bit off more than they could chew, but I think it's great to at least try, to have a richer story for that aspect.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes it's like really successful. I think like Yennefer's storyline in season 1, Lydia, Istrid is also a character that I really like in the series. I'm interested to see where 𝘧𝘵𝘵𝘪 is going to go. I would like to see 𝘧𝘵𝘵𝘪 be a little bit more three-dimensional than what we've seen in the course of the series, because he's just like, death to all elves. But, for the most part, I like the fact that they brought in characters that we only saw once in the books. So it's nice to get a little more throughout the series for sure.
It's interesting. I actually have a bit more. I do see 𝘧𝘵𝘵𝘪 as a bit more three-dimensional, because I don't know if this is a soliloquy, but because 𝘧𝘵𝘵𝘪 is, I think he's a man who's afraid of the unknown, and he's kind of has blinders on. And when he's afraid, he acts irrationally. So he, heard about this curse with the women, and then he's like, okay, mission, destroy all women. And he didn't allow any other information like to enter his consideration, like, oh, maybe it's not a legitimate curse. Maybe it's like an accident of of birth. Like maybe you shouldn't kill them. But I think that he's very fear-based, and when anything is different and when anything threatens his peace and stability, he just goes after eradicating that threat without allowing for the deliberative and calm judgment. So I think that's what he does with, distrusting Yen, which Yen is pretty distrustful, but whatever, and elves. And so I think it's not just plain old racism. I think that he's just a fear-based person who then has tunnel vision.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good way of putting it. I think I wonder if a lot of it is just the need for power and security, as you said, but at the top of the food chain. So when he's threatened, because the interesting thing is that no one else seems to have the same prejudices that 𝘧𝘵𝘵𝘪 does, or at least not to the same extent. So either he's just just inciting all of this in order to keep his position, as a fear-based campaign, or the threat is just heightening his own prejudices. And I don't know, I would like to explore that a little more and see where that is and where it goes for later seasons. But
Yeah, same. All right, so speaking of 𝘧𝘵𝘵𝘪, let's talk about what's going on with Aretuza. So we start off with this romantic scene. If it's here, I think it's here, with Vilgefortz and 𝘴𝘰𝘃, and he's like, oh, we have a newfound position of authority. I was surprised to see them together. I know we had hints to it in the end of season 1, but I don't see them clicking personally. I don't know. That was just, I didn't see any reason for them to like each other.
yeah, it seems to be something of both plot convenience and I guess story and character convenience, I think. Just that we have these people, we could just put them together and that's it. So yeah, this isn't something that's explored in the series, so it's interesting to see it here. Um, and their relationship, when you first see it, seems like something that's at least has a little bit of authenticity, which I think is then just entirely chucked aside by the time we get to the end of the episode as well, and see, I guess, what kind of effect stress has on their relationship, or the sudden power shift that happens later in the episode. So
Yeah, I guess what bothers me about that is that I feel like the relationship wasn't led up to. And 𝘴𝘰𝘃 is a very strict and stern person, right? So for somebody to get into her warm, loving side, I feel like they would have needed to show us a little bit of development of why she likes Vilgefortz, how Vilgefortz got, switched from I am tough, as nails lady to sweetie pie, whatever. Yennefer took a long time to get to the I like you part, So I would like to see some explanation of how did that happen?
yeah, I think unfortunately between the Battle of Sodden and episode 3, there's a month that happens between there, so it might have been just all of us are grieving together, and then we find each other, in our moments of grief. So maybe it was that, but like I said, it's all speculation.
Yeah, I mean, and the truth is, like, again, I know it's hard to devote screen time to everything. So I understand, the more scenes you have to shoot, the more money and blah, blah, blah. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
So 𝘬𝘪𝘵 shows up and, they don't like it. They're like, oh, Renee must be up to something. Correct. And he tells them about the elf baby and, did not say good news over here. Stradmore talks about, I honestly, also, I did not rewatch it again. I was going to rewatch it right before we record. So Stradmore talks about how I think the Fransesca the mage, and yeah, I think Stradmore accuses her kind of a soft spot for the baby, and like, what's it like? She's the co-chair on the council. She doesn't have a soft spot, and Stradmore's like, well, you know.
It's so unwarranted and so unprofessional on everybody's part. So,
Oh my god.
ugh.
I loved it also when he said the same similar kind of line when Yennefer was like, "Oh, I always pegged you as a pervert." He's like, "I'd never demean myself with the likes of you."
Oh my god, it's such a mess. Every character is such a mess when it comes to like slinging crap. But yeah, they really get in there with each other.
It was funny, I have to admit, it was a funny insult.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they all know about this, and this is something that, they try to keep track of what's going on. Like, their job as mages is to help along with the politics of the world, and obviously it's very fraught time. So information, that's something that they're good for. Now, it's mentioned that Triss is here, and Vilgefortz is like, oh, Triss is here, he didn't tell me, right? So there's a little bit of like tension that you know right away, and that he's interested in that information. And he says like, oh, I didn't tell you because she's sick. She has a stomach ailment, which from what I understand, I did read was it's a reference to, I think, the books or the
Yeah.
show where she has like diarrhea for like a long time or something.
Yeah, so there's, I guess, like, it's like a light story spoiler, I don't know. But there is a section of Blood of Elves where Triss is journeying back from Kaer through the mountains, as Dijkstra says, and she does get a stomach ailment. This is, I think, Blood of Elves chapter 4. That through the entire chapter, she is just like bedridden with diarrhea the whole time. And Geralt has to carry her into the woods and carry her back, and Ciri has to bathe her and every single day and braid her hair and do all this stuff. So yeah, that's probably a light book spoiler, not book spoiler, but book reference. But when I was watching it back this morning, I noticed Dijkstra's comment that based on the fact that she allegedly had a stomach ailment, he's able to triangulate her positioning or recent positioning to be somewhere in the mountains, which is where Kaer is. So
wait, stomach ailments would only be obtained there?
that's what Dijkstra's line is in this scene. So I would assume that he's letting Tissaia know that he knows more than she thinks he does. That he knows she came from Kaer. I would suspect.
Smart. It's funny about the whole thing. One thing I noticed with diarrhea, one thing I've noticed about Andrew Sapkowski, just from reading The Last Wish, which is the only book that I read, is that he has this like irreverent sense of humor where he's like, yeah, fantasy, nobility, exalted emotions. I'm gonna talk about poop.
For an entire chapter. Like and I think from what I understand, that is a lot of like the Polish humor as well. There's a lot of things that just can't be translated even into like English and some other languages. But when I've had Polish guests on, or even guests that have read, translations in similar languages, a lot of the feedback that I get is like, well, it's like kind of like this, but it's not like the same. But you need a little this culture, like some of this cultural context in order to get the joke. That happens, for example, in The Edge of the World, which is a story in A Sword of Destiny, which is the second compilation of short stories. The Edge of the World is actually am I forgetting the name of this? It's just like a saying for like the middle of nowhere. So where the devil or where the devil says goodnight is a saying for like the middle of nowhere. So and that's something that we just really wouldn't get as English readers. So yeah, it's I think between the cultural references and the very particular brand of humor he has, there's some stuff that's like very, I think we would describe it as like being off kilter or just like unusual for American and British readers specifically. A lot of fantasy has like come from England, obviously, and that sort of thing. So it's definitely a different kind of approach to fantasy, which is very enjoyable and very refreshing, in my opinion.
Yeah. I happen to love languages, and I know learned a couple in school and then spoke a couple growing up because of how I grew up. But one of my great grandparents, well, two of them, um, they were born in like Polish areas because the countries go back and forth. And one of them, I think, was born in Ukraine/Poland, where it went back and forth, and the other one was born in Czech, but one of her parents was Polish, so I think she spoke Polish as well. Basically, towards the end of her life, she didn't tell anybody because she grew up in Austria, but when she was older, she was like senile, she had Polish caretakers, and they would sing Polish lullabies to her, and she
Yeah.
recognized them and would sing along. So we derived that she must have known that from her Polish mother. Mother thought I had an English one. Anyway, point is that maybe one day I'll sit down and learn Polish.
It's a tough language. It's a tough language. I I think after, 2.5 years, I recently downloaded like Polish Duolingo. I've only done like 2 lessons on it, but the goal for me with downloading Polish Duolingo is just to not sound completely insane when I try to pronounce things. So I can at least get the pronunciation not offensively, basically. The only thing that's always in my mind is that the Polish W is pronounced like a V, and that's it. That's all I know off the top of my head.
Well, maybe we should, keep each other accountable. I don't know how dedicated you are, but I also just downloaded Duolingo again to relearn some stuff. So yeah, maybe we should be like Duolingo buddies.
Oh yeah. No, I'm very proud. I currently have like a 280-day streak. I'm still working on it, but I'm learning Spanish as well,
Okay.
or relearning Spanish. So
Amazing. Okay, now I have to, 280. That'll be my goal for now. I'm
they give
impressed.
you like a big old prize at a full year of Duolingo. So
Nice. Awesome.
yeah, clout.
Cool. So, yeah, so to say I mentioned that Ciri was with Geralt at Sudden and she was looking for Yen, and this is when they're having a private conversation with Triss and Tissaia. And Triss says, I only told the other witches and you, I don't trust anyone else. And Vilgefortz just like rushes in, he's like, I need to know everything. And oh my gosh, this man has like, for a politician who does not have tact, because that is not the way to go about like getting information, by like demanding it angrily. And Triss feels betrayed, she walks out, and Tissaia's like, she wasn't ready, like give her some space. And he says, Ciri, like she can end all war. Tissaia's like, I made a promise. And I hated how he behaved. He's like, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't necessary. I think he's such a manipulative gaslighter in this situation. Like,
Yeah.
oh, why are you with that douchebag? Oh my God. Tissaia, you deserve better.
Yeah, it's genuinely terrifying, like how quickly he turns. We had seen them be so loving in the beginning of the episode, and yeah, he storms in, and obviously Triss is upset because that was supposed to be private between Triss and Tissaia. Now Tissaia's told Vilgefortz, and Vilgefortz wants this information for his own means, and it feels like the annoying thing is that he yells at Tissaia. He has a huge outburst, walks away, comes back and says, and basically like guilts her, like,
Yeah.
I want to, you are my most trusted confidant. I wish I can like prove myself to be yours. And it's like, I don't even know if it's quite love bombing, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did love bomb her like off camera. Just because that kind of behavior is so abusive and so toxic, especially, and it's very polarizing, right? Um, so it's one of those things that as soon as that happened, I was just like, oh, like I don't like it. I don't like that relationship at all.
Yes, I think like what you said, like there's some qualities, there's some faults that I can forgive. Everyone has flaws, right? And in a relationship, everyone makes mistakes and everyone does things that are not so nice to the partner occasionally, right? But what he does here is, yeah, toxic, manipulative. He's very clearly saying this to try to get her to feel guilty and then give him the information that he wants. Like it's clearly selfish, and it gives me the heebie-jeebies, and I'm like, go away and never come back.
Yeah, well, because clearly he says he keeps saying that, like, their relationship, their partnership comes first, that he really values it. But clearly, with that outburst, he doesn't value it more than whatever this information that Triss has means to him. So it's it's one of those things where, like, does he really like to say it? Is he
Mhm.
using her because she's a powerful partner amongst the Brotherhood? Um, like, why does he need this information? Why is he so desperate for it? Why is this information worth ruining his relationship with Tissaia, with Triss, ruining her relationship with people that she with her loved ones and people that she clearly values and that mean a
Mhm.
lot to her. So,
Yeah, my impression was that he was, like you said, just using her. The only thing that contradicts that is maybe the fact that they got together right before the Battle of Sodden, where they probably thought they were going to die and not survive, I think. Although I'm not so sure about that. So in that case, that would have been a genuine connection. But the way that he acts, it seems that it's completely mercenary and that he's just pretending to like her.
yeah, I don't know.
Mhm.
Like I said, the Tissaia Vilgefortz thing is not something I necessarily could have predicted. So I don't know really where it's going. I have some hypotheses about what this might mean for seasons 3, maybe 4, but for the moment, I don't really know.
Oh,
So,
cool. Okay, I'm curious, like what when we get to those, like what if your predictions, are
yeah.
borne out.
Well, I think any guess is kind of just like we'll see.
Right. And I have to say, I wanted to like Vilgefortz. I thought he was really cool last season. How he took command and he, was action driven and wanted to try to do something and not just like let things go. And his outfit this season is amazing.
Mhm.
So I wanted to like him. And no, I can't.
Yeah. And that does your perception of him does track with what's in the books, right? Like we mm, we see or hear about Vilgefortz. I think it's more accurate that we hear about Vilgefortz. And he was a warrior, he was a soldier before really becoming a prominent mage. So he has battle experience, which we do get to see in Sodden. And that does really track with what we saw in season 1. So now that things are kind of breaking down and the audience perception of him is changing, it's interesting to see, or it'll be exciting to see what happens with this character in later seasons.
Mhm. Yep. All right. So now the last thing that happens in Aretuza is very interesting. We see Fringilla portals to Aretuza to meet with Artorius, her uncle. And obviously he's shocked, like, how is she getting here? And what is she doing here? And how dare you show your face here? And basically she's in trouble at, back in Sintra, where the elves are not exactly doing what they were supposed to be doing. And Emir's coming and she's worried that she is, off with her head kind of a thing. And I love Archer. The line between them are great because Artorius is like, oh, what order does Nilfgaard want you to carry for them? He doesn't think that she's being respected at Nilfgaard. He thinks that she's
Mhm.
just a tool for them. And she tells him that, the elves had a change of heart, the emperor has great expectations. And he, kind of against his better judgment, honestly, does talk to her and communicate with her and says how the elven birth helps our cause. And, now she really is humbling herself and she says, I need your help. Like, not as a mage, not as whatever, I'm your niece, please help me, which I thought was very touching and nice, because sometimes I would, not always think about that, but sometimes I think about, like the love that I have for my siblings. I'm like, no
Mhm.
matter what they would do, honestly, like I would just always love them because that's how it is, With
Yeah.
some people, you just always love them no matter what they do. Like you always love your children, even if they're terrible people, like they're just, you can't stop. So seeing that bond of like family and how she's appealing to it is touching.
Yeah, I do. Mhm. Sorry, I don't know why my voice is just like, not today. This is a terrible time for it to decide that. I think that Fringilla coming back to Aretuza and coming back to her uncle really is a direct response to something that we had seen that we haven't really discussed yet, which was a conversation between Fringilla and Francesca, in which Francesca says, like, I know we're friends, but family comes above everything.
Mhm.
So to me, it's unsurprising that after that conversation with Francesca, Fringilla would turn to her the only blood relative that we know she has at least, which is her uncle Artorius. And so it's I think that this drives her actions later in the episode because she loses Francesca to an extent, right? Because Francesca has chosen the elves, she's chosen her daughter. Um she goes to her uncle. Her uncle spurns her as well. And I think that having those two, connections, like having those two connections break down, I think is what drives her to the desperation that she experiences later in the episode.
Mhm. Yeah. And actually, it's interesting. So in the beginning, he doesn't really spurn her; he just insults her, basically, right? So he does relent. He tells her he feels bad that he didn't stand up for her the night at Aretuza when Yennefer took her spot. And I mean, that's great for someone, honestly. I don't know if we necessarily have like positive feelings towards Artorius, but the fact that he can admit that he didn't do what he should have it takes a lot. I think that's an admirable trait, and it shows that he cares for Fringilla.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of Artorius in the same way that I'm not a fan of 𝘕𝘵𝘵𝘪𝘆, and I think I wonder if like you're not supposed to like really like them because they represent kind of this old guard,
Mm.
and old man seat of power kind of thing amongst the Brotherhood. So I don't know. I think it's the kind of thing where he clearly doesn't respect her very much, or at least the position that she's been given, or how she's risen to power.
Mm.
He has little to no respect for that, despite the fact that she's his niece. She's still, if not an enemy, someone who's antagonizing his position. So it's the kind of thing that he doesn't really seem to want to help her, which is unfortunate for everybody involved. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what happens next? He says, like, basically, okay, if you want to come back, you would have to apologize for believing you can have an impact there. It's interesting. He didn't say like you should apologize for using fire magic, which is forbidden and causing all those mages to like suicide himself, or like for, I don't know, fighting against old mages. He says you should apologize for believing you can have an impact there, which showed me two things. A, that a lot of the mages regard Nilfgaard as like a lost cause, and like they're just obsessed with the religious zealotry, like you can't guide them. And also B, it really puts her down because it's saying you couldn't have helped them. You're not influential enough, you're not powerful enough, you're not smart enough, or whatever, cunning enough to have helped them.
Exactly. Yeah, she's coming to Artorius in a time of need because she trusts him because they're family. And like I said, he just shows her little to no respect in regards to what she's experienced over the last, decades. That because we know that it's been a very long time since they were at school. So he has no regard for her at all, in my opinion at least. So
Yeah, it's kind of one thing I found interesting is that a lot of times family members who know you since you were little, they kind of still see you as that person. And then even though, you've gone on, you've developed in so many ways, whether it's professionally or personally, interpersonally, in whatever ways we've changed from when we're kids, but family members sometimes like, oh, you're just a little kid. So
yeah.
a lot of it might be that.
I mean, which is crazy though, because I think it's episode 3 or 4 of season 1. Or no, I think it's episode 4. By the time we see Yennefer between the ball that Artorius references and the next episode, 30 to 40 years have already passed. So it's between that event and now, it's probably easily been like 50 years, and he still doesn't respect her. Like, so it's crazy. Like, that's just crazy. I don't know. I don't have any other words for it. But and frankly disrespectful. So
Yeah. And the next words that he says, I wrote them all out because it's an amazing line. So antagonizing. He says, there are those who are obsessed with finding power and those who know their place. You know which one you are, thank God. You wouldn't have come back here if you didn't. And you see her face and that's it. Like she was about to, go back there to apologize, whatever, throw her lot in with the Brotherhood. And now, no, that's the end of that. And then we'll see what happens next, which is amazing.
yeah. Yeah.
That was the switch. One too much.
Yeah, it's and I think like it ties the storyline of the Deathless Mother for Fringilla very well. Like especially the continual references to Fringilla's power or lack of power that we've seen throughout the series and throughout the season specifically. I think like Cahir references it, Fransesca references it, her uncle references it,
Yennefer.
the 𝘧𝘵𝘪𝑗𝑔𝑢𝑎RD, Yennefer, everybody keeps telling her that she doesn't have power. She's like, I don't need power, I need faith. I have faith. And then suddenly It's not, oh, that little bit of ambition we heard at the end of, episode 2 or whatever. We see that, I think, in full force by the end of this episode.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to that because I love that part. So now let's move to Cintra and see what's going on there. So yeah, kind of going back and forth in time a little bit. So Fringilla is talking to 𝘕𝘰𝘮, and 𝘕𝘰𝘮 is this general who is the worst. I probably hate him the most. But I hate him. It's horrible. And they're talking about like he was a spy, and he says, "How can you be sure Virginia would have planted a spy like because I would have?"
Yeah. I find that really interesting because I think that's one of those things that we just kind of assume about everybody is that like people don't do things, or it's almost impossible to imagine other people doing things that you personally wouldn't do. So for this general to be like, yeah, obviously there's a spy here because I would have done it. It just speaks to the kind of character that he is, especially because it's hard to imagine, like I said, it's hard to imagine other people doing things that you yourself wouldn't be capable of or wouldn't even fathom.
Yep. There's a lot of current event stuff that's going on. I'm like, why, how? And I'm like, well, this is why I'm not a tyrannical despot because I don't understand that.
Yeah.
So he's complaining how everybody's coming in and they're not checking them, and he's worried about the spies and there's too many elves and they're not, scanning them, screening them enough. And Cahir is, I've said this before, he's caught kind of between two worlds because surprisingly, he shows sympathy to the elves, and he does, say like, oh, it's that's what they're doing. But he also doesn't want to antagonize 𝘕𝘰𝘮 too much, and I think he recognizes that if he lets the elves have like too much looseness, the Iron Hand is going to come down harder, because like if he kind of like strikes a middle balance that makes both sides happy, it'll be better for everybody. But like if they're allowed to do whatever they want, 𝘕𝘰𝘮 and his crew are going to get super mad, which honestly is exactly what happens. So I happen to love Cahir because for whatever reason I like that kind of twisted character. But I do think that he's walking a delicate line and trying to placate both, like, let's say the hardliners with 𝘕𝘰𝘮 and the softliners with Fringilla.
Yeah, it's interesting, the three of them and like their triage of power, just because Fringilla uses her power and it seems like she wants to genuinely help the elves while also serving Nilfgaard's needs, right? But her main priority is this friendship and this alliance with Fringilla and her people. Cahir has like one goal, which I think is what keeps him on the side of like not quite neutrality, but he doesn't go out of his way, for the most part, to antagonize either Fringilla or 𝘕𝘰𝘮, because his only goal is, I need to capture Cirilla of Cintra. I need to capture Cirilla of Cintra. That's all he's been doing for 2 seasons. So as long as he can achieve that, I think everything else is kind of indifferent. Like, Fringilla has her people, she has her elves, but don't let that get in the way of the fact that we need to find Cirilla of Cintra. You can have an entire war, go ahead, general, like fight everybody you want on the continent, but that can't take us away from the fact that we need to find Cirilla of Cintra. He's so focused on that. So he kind of teeters in this space where, as long as nothing is an issue to him personally, he'll advise in whatever way he needs to. But yeah, you have the general and Fringilla, I think, are the most conflicted in terms of their aspirations and their beliefs.
Yeah, and their whole conversation like reflects that. They talk about how the elves are not trained, and Fringilla's like, well, they were celebrating till late at night. She's like, I'll talk to them, right? So she's desperate, to try to get some order again, like, so that the hard head doesn't come down on them. She's like, okay, I gotta get them to shape up a little more. 𝘕𝘰𝘮's like, you're not the commander, and then he says some horrible things, like he smirks like like, she should remember that. I'm gonna kill him. I'm like, stop it, you're so obnoxious.
Yeah. Yeah, he's not great. But he is the character that I think we're meant to hate, because we're meant to sympathize with Fringilla and, to a lesser extent Cahir, but mostly Fringilla in this situation.
Yeah. And honestly, I think it reeks of sexism as well. I don't know if it's, he never mentions anything about prison women. Maybe it's just because he doesn't like Fringilla, but yeah, I don't know. So Cahir tries to, he talks to Fringilla. He's like, I'm not against you. I'm trying to, we're on the same side. Like, let me deal with them. They'll respect a strong hand. So I think that's his, again, being even-handed. And 𝘕𝘰𝘮, this is like very disturbing incident. There's this woman who, came in to the city without being checked. She just snuck in, and she's like, "Oh, I just wanted food," and she's crying. And Haki is like, "What I can't even talk about it. It was so horrible." He's like, "Oh, you call yourself a leader?" And Dara was watching, and he, throws her off, and she's hanged. And that's just very traumatizing.
Yeah, it's I think again when we talk about that balance or imbalance of power, like we kind of see that in play here, right? Because Haki has a certain amount of leadership as a general, especially over his forces, especially as that fearmonger amongst the people. Whereas Cahir and Fringilla have a very different kind of power. And when they just see him, they're completely immobilized. They don't do anything, either because of fear of retribution or because they don't want to, or because they feel like they can't. So in any case, it makes their power dynamic really interesting between the three of them.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I was also, a little bit upset. Like, you could tell that they aren't happy about what's happening, but yeah, I don't know whether they felt like it would be too much to try to save her, because then Haki would just go ballistic on them.
Mhm.
I don't know. It was horrible. So anyway, 𝘕𝘪𝘵 and Fransesca are discussing the name of Baby, and they think about, Fiona, Lucerne, which I was like, do they know that Cyrilla's name is also Fiona? No, it's coincidence. And then Francesca comes in, and Fringilla comes in, and she tells them, the army didn't come in. And she's like, well, they were celebrating. And she's like, 1 day's a hangover, 2 is sedition. And now Francesca is like, well, I've had a change of heart. We never intended to fight for Nilfgaard. And, 𝘕𝘪𝘵𝘕 said this. And, Francesca convinced me now I have a better reason not to fight. I was so appalled at this, because they're breaking their agreement. I mean, they have been given this city, they're being supplied with like food and clothing, which is coming from I don't know where. As a person who one of the things we learned in school was like logistics and operations, and like, where's all this food coming from? Where's all this blankets coming from? Like, it's not like they have a lot of resources. Like, someone's got to grow the food. Someone's got to, grow the flax and raise the sheep that are breaking the wool. And like, where's all these resources coming from? It's very, very difficult to like supply a city. And like, they're being given all this stuff, and like, now you're like, no, I'm gonna renege on my part of the agreement and not fight because I had a baby. Like, I have kids. You can still do other stuff while you have a baby. Just saying.
Yeah, I don't think the Deathless Mother was super clear on her terms and conditions. So, because to a degree, they did get what they wanted. It's just that Fringilla obviously just baked and popped out a baby. So in her mind, like, the agreement might be done. Like, she has the future of the elves literally in her hands, and that's it. We did exactly what we came here to do. And so whereas for Fringilla, that agreement isn't done, it's ongoing, it's permanent or semi-permanent. So it's the kind of thing where they're obviously at very different stages, especially judging by this minor disagreement between the two of them. And yeah, it's just like watching it back again this morning, it's kind of like, so if they're not aligned, does that mean that the Deathless Mother takes everything away? Like, what does this mean now? Were they supposed to be aligned forever? Like, so yeah, and I think that lends that uncertainty around their friendship, and whether or not, again, that was a term or condition of the Deathless Mother's pact or gifts, I should say, kind of become wow, kind of becomes clear by the end of the episode, I think.
Yeah, so I didn't even think about it in terms of the Deathless Mother's agreement. I thought of it as like they made an agreement to fight for Nilfgaard. We got the city, you got the baby, and you fight for Nilfgaard. And to me, it's just such short-sightedness and thoughtlessness on the side of both Francesca and 𝘕𝘪𝘵𝘕, where they're like literally living in the city. They're surrounded by a more powerful army. They're living there at the discretion of this army, and they think they can just say no and get away with it. And that they're all going to keep living in the city. They're going to keep living in their fancy palace, and the elves are just going to be safe in the city after they just said no to the people who have the power. What are they thinking? Like, how is this going to end well for them?
I mean, I think it's yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. At the same time, I wonder if it's something that it's challenging for us to really fathom, just because like their people have been encroached on for centuries. They've been attacked, vilified for centuries, and they suddenly have a chance. So that kind of value, I think, the values shift. Their value shifts from survival to really the ability to flourish. And what, as I think as Phil Evangel says, it's like, why would I take all this hope that I have and just and the growth that and the opportunity that we have as a race and just send all of our young people to someone else's war? So I think that's a lot of it, that despite the agreement, as I said, that you can't really supersede this desire for family and this desire for the growth of a new nation, basically.
But I get I get it emotionally.
Yeah.
Like, of course, they never really wanted to fight for Northcross to begin with. They just did it because they were desperate. And like, yeah, of course, why would they want to, go die in other people's wars? But like, that is not thinking 2 steps ahead. I mean, they're
Yeah.
literally going to be, I don't know what's going to happen, but like, if they don't cooperate with their more powerful force, they're not getting their city. Anywho, so yeah, this is where she talks about the bond, like you said, the bond that kind of broke in the family. And I was a little concerned. I felt like Fringilla should have told them the stakes. Like if you don't fight, Hockey and his crew are going to like be very angry and who knows what will happen. Like I feel like she should have communicated that a bit better so they understand how important it is, because Fringilla is just trying to help them. Like she wants the best for them. So I think, as they always say, communication is key.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. It's the whole thing is just like terrible on all sides.
Yeah. So now we have Jara tells 𝘧𝘵𝘪𝘴𝘰𝘥𝘦 he's been inspired by the birth of the baby, and he's like, tell 𝘧𝘪𝘵 I'm done. I don't want to spy for them anymore. And we have more of a conversation with Hockey and Cahir. He's like, oh, I had my doubts about Fringilla all along. If her head is still on her shoulders by tomorrow, I'll be shocked. And Cahir is not happy about it. He tries to talk to Fringilla. He's again trying to warn her, trying to help her out. He says, we're supposed to be on the same side. You're supposed to search for Ciri, which, like you said, that's his focus. And then we have the best event ever. Basically, we have in between, right? Fringilla has gone to her uncle. She's been, she's like, okay, let me ask for your help. She gets rebuffed. And then when he says that super insulting line, she's like, that's it, I've had it. She comes back to Aretuza, 𝘕𝘰𝘪. And they're all, Hockey and his crew with Cahir all sitting there eating. Suddenly they all freeze. She walks in while they're all frozen. And it's like, whoa. One of the things they taught us in Aretuza was, the paralytic qualities of nightshade. And I was also taught that whenever a lesser light tries to take what is yours, do not sit there and take it. And she just goes around and just stabs everybody gruesomely. It's fantastic. It is gripping. It is amazing. And we see, except for Cahir, she doesn't do, stab Cahir. Cahir's like, eye is twitching because he's terrified. And she tells him, you will rave. It's like, well, what a shame. I caught all these generals planning to betray him here. Oh, wow. Guess I have to kill him.
Yeah, admittedly, I'm super squeamish in general. So thrillers, horror, gore, not my jam. So I've watched this episode twice and still have not watched this scene specifically. I did, however, in preparation for this episode, watch it with like something covering everything but the subtitles.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I can't. I just physically can't. And I think it's interesting because Artorius in the last scene says like there are people who essentially know they want power and people who know their place. And with that assumption, Artorius assumes that she's the kind of person who knows their place. So I wonder if this is also a counter to that, where she's like, I'm not the kind of person who knows my place, obviously. And so obviously I'm the kind of person who wants power. And I will keep it by getting rid of those who threaten me. And again, in a bit of desperation, she's lost Fransesca as an ally. She doesn't feel supported by her only family. She doesn't have the support of the generals, which she's then overheard at this table. I'm surprised if her head doesn't come off by tomorrow. Like, who says that? So she obviously, as you said, triggers the nightshade. And yeah, goes around just everybody. I do think that she's been driven to such a point of desperation, which as we see the deathless mother feeds off of.
Mm,
And I do have the assumption that she left Cahir as like a witness to her glory and as a way of, I guess, blackmailing him,
yeah.
or threatening him, that, you're just a soldier, you're not a mage, and if you do anything that's out of line, I 100% can do this to you too. So
Yeah, and I think she spared him because she recognized that he wasn't completely antagonistic to her, that he tried to smooth between both her and the other generals. But yeah, by the way, I also block the screen whenever it's very gory. I just go like this and I don't look.
yeah, I just will not put myself through that. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but it's amazing. I think, she's finally done. Like she spent season 1 and season 2 being pushed around, being told what to do, following others, and Yennefer especially, who does not follow anybody, she's like, why are you, taking orders? You should just, go into your own power, do whatever you want. And she finally did it. She finally she's been tipped over the edge and that's it. She's done. She's going to step into power and just be assertive and do what she wants, which I think is great. I mean, honestly, those people deserve to die. I don't know about the other ones because we don't really know who they are, but Hockey,
Yeah.
definitely. Goodbye. I'm so happy he's dead. I want to see that again. And yeah.
Oh, God. Oh,
Yeah.
no, I will say, like, the one critique I think I do have about the season is I think that this storyline with Fringilla, for the most, like, I do enjoy it. I just think it would have been stronger without the inclusion of an external force like the Deathless Mother
Mhm.
goading her to do that. If she had been pushed into this of her own will and agency, I think that would have been much stronger to see someone be driven to that level of desperation without, someone in your ear saying like, we have to have this alliance, like, or else. Um, so that I think that would be like my biggest critique for the season. But
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's funny is I kind of like deleted her in my mind. Like to me, it was like all Francesca's, personality. You're right. Both Meir probably had a hand, but I choose to ignore that. Yeah, and speaking of Voleth Meir, basically the last thing we have in Sintra is that it's a horrible scene. Somebody has killed the elf baby. Francesca and 𝘱𝑗𝘕 are, very distraught, and their pain makes Voleth Meir super happy, and she's just laughing. And finally, she has the power to escape from her cup. Very
yeah,
spooky.
I genuinely don't know if I have any commentary on that. Like the thing I loved about that elven baby was just like the little elven ear prosthetics that they had put on it in a previous scene between Fringilla and Francesca and Philavandrel. And it's heartbreaking. They and Tom Canton and Misha Simpson are so good in every scene that they're in. And this scene of their grief and their desperation is no exception.
Yeah, and I've been following a lot of the people on Instagram, including prosthetics people. So they apparently built the baby. Sometimes it's a live baby, but when they there's a picture of like, I don't know if it's the prosthetics designers or if it's Misha and Tom. They're holding the baby, and apparently they designed the baby to look like it would have what an actual baby of theirs
Yeah.
would look like, which is really cool. The attention to detail.
Yeah, I'd seen that as well. And it's just really neat. I love the production aspects of any show, really, like everything from sets to props to costuming to lighting to editing. Like I just love it all. That's my favorite part of it. And so to see things like that brought into it, I find really great.
Yep. All right, so now next storyline, Geralt, Jaskier, all that stuff. So we end with last time we ended with Yennefer disappeared at Nenneke with Ciri. So now Geralt is kind of finishing up that storyline at the temple, and basically Nenneke is telling him that if Ciri has that power, like you can tell her, but this is bigger than you can chew. And she talked, they mentioned how Yen ran away with her. And he says, I wish she knew the balance that you spoke of, right? Because Nenneke is all about balance, and Yennefer obviously is not balanced at all. And she's like, I wish she had that balance, but I learned my lesson about Yennefer and wishes. Just funny. Sad but funny.
Yeah. Nenneke is also a character that I really like in the show. She is different in the books, because she's a little more, I guess, dowdy in the books, still sharp tongue, but a slightly softer characterization with a really soft spot for Ciri. So yeah, it's and Enneka in the books is very hard and tough on Geralt, which I do love, and I think we see a little bit of that in the previous episode, Dear Friend. Um, but yeah, I think yeah, I just generally like scenes between Geralt and Enneka.
Yeah. I actually, Venica comes up a lot in Last Wish, which is the one book I read, and yeah, she was pretty cool there. Yeah, great, very sharp tongue, like you said. So now we switch to seeing Jaskier, adorable. I don't know about you, but Jaskier is like, I don't know, Jaskier and Cahir, I can't decide which one, but they're both my favorite characters. I love them. Jaskier is hilarious. So he's sitting there in prison and he's singing the song, which I sing all the time, by the way. It's like, so lock me up and sack me up and throw away the key. Sorry if I curse, go fuck yourself, you whore son, because you're through fucking with me. Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah. And it's nice to get a little taste of Joey like a cappella as well, because he sounds lovely. He sounds great.
Yeah. And it's just so his character, like the guard is annoyed and he's like, I don't care. He's just singing with the mice and just talking to them. It's hilarious. I mean, the guard being annoyed by his singing is also hilarious. It's just so funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then we see Geralt coming and he's fighting with the guard, and Jaskier like hears him, he pauses, and then he just keeps singing, whatever. So they're fighting outside, doesn't bother me.
Yeah, he has no reason to assume that his situation's going to change anytime soon. So he's just going to keep going, probably in the way that he has for, God knows how long it's been since he split up with Yennefer. So
yeah, and then this is really touching scene where like Geralt comes in and Jaskier hasn't seen him yet, and he's like, these people have no respect. How many times do I have to tell you? And then he's like, Geralt. And it's a very nice scene. So like they hug, and he's like, oh, fuck it, they hug. And then Jaskier like tells him off. He's like, you abandoned me at the mountain in Caragorn. I have to slide down the mountain. You see these shoes? And Geralt's like, oh, Jaskier. And he's like, don't Jaskier me. This is how it works. It's like, thank you, because Geralt, not to like be too mean about him, but like he does not treat Jaskier well, and he just like verbally abuses him sometimes and rolls his eyes and makes him feel like he's not wanted, which I noticed was not the same in the books, at least the one book that I read. But anyway, and then Jaskier's like, no, you can't treat me like this. You have to like communicate with me. You have to apologize to me. Like I'm taken seriously. So thank you, Jaskier, for standing up for yourself.
yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting that in the show, especially, well, how do I want to say this? Geralt knows that he needs help, and he goes to Jaskier, which is really special because like we've spent so much time with the other Witchers in this season, and as I said, season 2 is very different from the book. It was the book that would be the most one-to-one with it, which was Blood of Elves. But Geralt's best friend throughout all 7 or 8 books really is Jaskier. We only see the Witchers in 2 chapters in Blood of Elves, chapter 1 and chapter 2, or chapter 2 and chapter 3, and that's basically it. And we never really see them again. So it's really the kind of thing where Geralt's best friend really is Jaskier. He goes to Jaskier for everything. They go to each other for everything. And I think it says a lot here that when Geralt needs help, he doesn't go back to Kaer Morhen, and he doesn't, rally his brothers there. He finds Jaskier. So
it's interesting because I actually saw him once Jaskier as just like rescuing him, because he'd been told, and Yennefer told him that he was in trouble. So I didn't even think of it as like going to get help. More like, okay, I got to get Jaskier out of prison. But that's interesting that maybe it's both.
yeah, well, he does say Geralt, I think when he walks in, does say like, I need help.
Yeah,
like, so yeah, there's a lot of other stronger people that would be better help in a fight than I think a bard. But yeah, so it's interesting that he goes to him.
Yeah, well, he's definitely entertaining help. I don't know. I love him. Like I know some people might find him annoying. I'm like, this is great. I love this character. So they had this discussion, and Geralt's like, why was Yen in Oxenfurt? And he says, she was saving my life. And they wade into this pool at this moment, and Jaskier takes this moment to show us, well, more like Joey takes this moment to show us all the hard work he's been doing, working out, because everyone's like, whoa, hey, Jaskier, didn't know you had that underneath the 𝘸𝘪𝘵𝘩, or however you say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know I've been seeing lots of memes going around it. And so he was like, well, Yennefer was tolerable because she had lost her magic. And Geralt's like, she lost her magic? And he's like, oh, maybe she was lying. He's like, wait, she probably was lying because how else did she pour the whole stuff out of there? And he's like, oh my gosh. And then Geralt's like, ask more questions. He's like, yeah, she said something about hut. Geralt realizes what line she was, and what line she was saying, and then he, recalls back. This was the witch that the first Witchers imprisoned in her house, and basically they talk about how like she used to sacrifice a child to get her magic back, and then Jaskier's like, yeah, she would do that, and it's okay, we have to go to Sintra. At that moment, they get an axe on his shirt because it turns out Yarpen and Zigrin and all his elves, all his dwarves are there, which is really cute. Nice to see them again.
Yeah, Jeremy Crawford is just delightful in his role as Yarpen. And yeah, it's nice to have them here. There is a storyline in Blood of Elves that really uses the dwarves. So I was quite excited to have a bigger role for Yarpen in at least an episode or two in this season. So their role is much smaller, I think, than what we have seen in the books. But it is great. Like I'm just happy for the actor. Like I'm always happy for the actors in this situation, and I love that they brought him back. So
yeah, it's interesting because my impression, at least from the show, was that when they interacted with the dragon, like I didn't sense a particularly close connection, but they obviously are happy to see each other. Like Geralt, it seems like Geralt trusts Yarpen and his band, which I didn't know that he did, but I'm glad that he does.
yeah, I mean the continent, I would imagine it's vast, and medieval times where you don't have like phones and like usual connection, weekly connection. I feel like even seeing somebody after years and just having that familiarity and being able to recognize them is so important. And having that trust, as Yarpen says, like on the trail, you don't refuse help on the trail, is so important, I think, as they're both trying to accomplish something.
Yeah. And one thing that I also found funny was that he asked him, they had gotten to be lords of vassal state, right? And then he's like, well, turns out it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. I didn't want to be Lord of Vassals in Kiergorn. Now they're protecting the rose for Henself instead. And they talk about like Lucas Corto, we got married, it was money. And then he's like, oh, can I borrow your horse? He's like, yeah, what's the mission? He's like, doesn't say anything. He's like, oh, it's the secret kind. I'm so excited, my favorite. And he's like, we're all going on an adventure. Geralt literally told him like, I can't tell you. And he's like, we're all coming along.
Yeah. Which I think says a lot about Yarpen's character as well, and that like, yeah, he makes the assumption that he's gonna come along, but it's also under the guise of like, we're going to help you. Whatever you need, we got you. The king can wait. So it's really nice. It's really nice.
Yeah, like he recognizes that Geralt is the type of guy who will not ask for help, and he'll just like, I'll do it all by myself. And Yarpen's like, no, we're gonna help you whether you want us or not. Like we know that you're just like a little stoic sometimes, and you can't ask for help, and you just like to be gruff, but we're gonna come along.
Yeah.
And then so they're talking about this and their adventure, what they're doing, and Jaskier's like, oh, we're definitely gonna kill her. But he does say something sympathetic about Yen. He says that, and it's a really significant line because it reflects Jaskier and Geralt's relationship. And he says that people do stupid things when they're trapped in a corner, and they say stupid things, but that's what friends do. They come back. Because obviously Geralt, when he was, back at the mountain with the dragon, Yen had just like rejected him, and Geralt, receives this rejection, takes all those negative feelings and just dumps it on Jaskier and like blames Jaskier for everything that just happened because he has no better outlet for his emotions. But Jaskier is like, yeah, I know that's what you did for me, right? You were saying stupid things because you felt trapped in a corner, but like I forgive you and we're still friends. So that was great. I thought it was a great line.
Yeah. I do like that as well because it shows how both Geralt and Jaskier have grown, and as you said, it's very sympathetic toward Yennefer, even though Jaskier didn't like her in much of season 1, that their experiences have kind of bonded them in a very particular way, but they did bond throughout the beginning of season 2.
Yeah, and I think Jaskier is just a sympathetic person in general. I think he's a nice person.
Yeah, he's a poet. He's a poet. So yeah, it's unsurprising that he has such a sympathetic way of viewing what's happening to her right now.
Yeah, even while recognizing, he's like, yeah, we're gonna kill her, which is a little bit, I think, supposed to be over the top and humorous, but I think he does recognize she's very dangerous, even while he has sympathy for her.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, and then, there's another funny line, but Geralt, after he says that, he's like, I'm sorry. So thank you, Geralt, for saying I'm sorry. And he's like, oh, you're always so emotional. Yeah, I'm so sad and complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder always, like, how much Joey Beatty ad-libs, I'm under the impression that it's quite a bit, but maybe I'm wrong, but I wonder how much of this was just him be like, in character or just saying stuff.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of also wonder how much the actor is like, Joey is like 𝘴𝘵𝘪𝘴, because sometimes we're not our characters, sometimes we are, some like there's so I wonder if in real life he's also that funny. Or if it's.
He's very subdued, I think, at least in press interviews that I've seen with him. His voice is a slightly lower pitch, and he's very, like, just the way that he sits, and he's very, like, calm and collected and speaks very slowly and with a much different pace. But with 𝘴𝘴𝘪𝘴, I think he actually did talk to some interviewer before, that 𝘴𝘴𝘪𝘴 for him, it's at, like, a much higher octave, and it's much more melodical, and the way that he talks is very, like, fun and very, like, biz bam boom, like, so I think he's very much, like, in character when he's 𝘴𝘴𝘪𝘴.
Yeah, I've also noticed that. I've also been watching like a great, like all the interviews. So I've also
Yeah.
seen that he's more subdued in interviews. Let's
Yeah.
see. So now the last storyline of this episode is Yen and Ciri and what happens with them. So last we saw them, they portaled out. We saw them in this dark place. Now we see that it's the house that Ciri was at when she was taking them with this one. So 𝘕𝘰𝘵 and 𝘰𝘰𝘪𝑗's house in the forest. And so it's really sad because basically she's like, oh, they were so great to me, they're so nice, and then she turns a corner and sees these like dead bodies burned to a crisp. It's so sad. And she realizes, she's like, oh my gosh, how did they know I was here? How did they track me? She feels responsible, which is a big thing for Ciri. She always feels like she's responsible for the death and destruction around her, and she feels a lot of guilt about that.
Yeah. And that is very consistent with the books as well. The Ciri that we get in the books is also very mindful of this almost like cyclone of, as you said, death and destruction that seems to follow her everywhere. So it is obviously a huge shame that we lose these characters, because they're so delightful in episodes, 7 and 8 of season 1. And it's really heartbreaking for Ciri to know that she had brought this upon such a lovely family who was just minding their own business and doing something kind for both Geralt and Ciri at the end of the season.
Yeah. So what happens next is a bit of, to me, it does not like make so much sense, but she wonders if Rience works for Nilfgaard, and then Yen's like, oh, let me take this opportunity to try to manipulate Ciri into doing what I want her to do. And she says, well, they must be holding Geralt at Sintra, and I don't know, it just didn't seem, and then Ciri's like, let's go to Sintra. And it just didn't seem realistic to me. Like Yen's explanation didn't, like if I was Ciri, I'd be like, I'd ask a few more questions before trusting this random lady and just like galloping to Sintra.
Yeah.
It didn't seem very
Yeah. I mean, well, from what Ciri knows at this point, she knows that Yennefer and Geralt are very close. She saw them making out, but she knows that like Geralt and Yennefer do have a trusting relationship, or at least did, as far as she knows. So it is a bit of a stretch, I think, on both of their sides. I would agree that Yennefer, well, is it Yennefer or Ciri that makes the assumption that, no, it's Ciri that makes the assumption that Rience must work for Nilfgaard. And then that's when Yennefer offers, like, oh, well, the closest Nilfgaardian outpost is Sintra, which is conveniently where Voleth Meir wants to bring Ciri. So it's definitely opportunistic on Yennefer's part. She hasn't really sussed out this girl yet. They only just met, teleported away, bam, they're in this burnt house. So, yeah, it's I think you just need to suspend your disbelief for like a little bit.
Yeah.
And your belief, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, if I was here, I'd be like, well, let's first go back and check on Geralt. And like, why doesn't she ask Yen to portal them to Nennika, portal them to Sintra? Like, she doesn't, she just like, oh, well, I guess we're traveling on a horse now. Which another thing, people were like, why are there fresh horses when the people are dead? Which theoretically they could have been just killed or very recently killed. So maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Ciri confides in Yennefer that she fantasized about finding Black Knight and killing him. Which now I kind of wonder, does Yennefer know? Because Yennefer spent time with Cahir. Does Yennefer know that Cahir is the Black Knight? Like, I don't think so.
Probably not.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. What would she think when she's like, well, Cahir and I kind of, I wouldn't say had a thing, but like had some encounters.
Yeah. That part was surprising because like Yennefer and Cahir, I don't think they ever meet in the books. So the inclusion of this was certainly surprising as a book reader, but not necessarily like unwelcome or anything, just different.
It was my favorite scene in the entire like season 1 and season 2 combined.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, whatever. I like Cahir for certain reasons, and I love that interaction with them. Anyway, I've talked already enough about it in like episode 4 and probably every other episode since, so I will shut up about it.
Yeah.
So again, it's like, oh well, first Ciri's like, I'll go by myself. She's like, no, I have to go with you because if anything would happen to you, Geralt would never forgive me.
Right.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. It's like I said, everybody's a mess all around for a number of different reasons, but this is again, Yennefer slowly moving to that point of desperation, I think.
Yeah, and I said this last episode, but what I did feel needed more development was a sense of conflict, because I understood, she was pushed to desperation with losing her magic, and like she was about to be executed. So like I get that she finally said, okay, Voleth, I'll get this child. Then as soon as she sees that it's Geralt's child, I feel like there should have been more conflict along the way. And I didn't see that expressed so much. Like I would have loved to see a few more conflicted expressions. But she's like, oh, I really wish I didn't have to do this. Something like that.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think like with the volume of plot lines and storytelling that they start to set up in the beginning of the season, they have very little time to actually like bring a lot of these things to fruition in a way that feels earned sometimes, right? And I think some of that is like just having to compress a lot of these storylines into fragments of episodes as well. Like I think and I think that would be like my other big critique of the season, was that just with having to compress a lot of things in, there wasn't a lot of room for certain storylines to breathe. And I would have liked to see, even with the changes that were made to the plot, for example, I think we could have focused on different villains, different season-long villains, in order to give a bigger storyline and more earned conflict. So I would have loved to see, for example, Eskel, like that scene that happens in episode 2, if we were to continue with that. I think he would have been a great end of season villain within 𝘴𝘵𝘺, whereas Rience would have been a strong end season villain for everything else that happens on the continent. So I think if those storylines were played out much longer, we would have had the opportunity to really explore this conflict that Yennefer has, again, with or without Voleth Meir. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Agree. And there's a nice line here where, as they're traveling to Sintra, Ciri asks what was between Yen and Geralt, and she says, longing, regret, hope, and fear. I think I covered it. Ciri's like, you love him too.
Yeah, that is pulled directly from the books. It's pulled directly from Blood of Elves chapter 7. It's granted they're not on horseback, they're not like in a desperate flight anywhere, so it's a much more it's a much different scene. That scene happens still when Ciri and Yen are trying to get to know each other, but it's a very cute scene. Yennefer immediately tells Ciri, like, you can ask me anything. This is a two-way street. Like, anything, any truth or any insight you want from me, you can have it. And that's Ciri's first question. She's like 11 or 10 in the book. She's like, what is there between you and Geralt, Lady Yennefer? Oh shit. And the dialogue even says, like, Ciri couldn't believe her own impertinence. And it's just, and then that's the answer that Yennefer gives her, though. It's very honest and truthful and deep, that their relationship, it's one of love, but it still has its own conflicts and turmoil and confusion, and complexity. So
That's funny. I've spoken about this more on my other podcasts, but I talk a lot about my relationship with my husband on the podcast, which
Mhm.
I always tell him like, you could listen to it, but it's kind of, it's like I'm like telling our private information, but I happen to think that like we have a bit of a drama filled relationship.
Mhm.
And that's just how I operate. I don't think I would be happy with this, a dull, boring, like always happy relationship. So this, what she says between that, what they have between them, like I related to that. I'm like, you know, a lot of conflicting emotions make it exciting.
Yeah.
So they get to a bridge, and for reasons that I also didn't quite understand, they can't really cross it. I thought there were some pretty shallow parts that I saw in the screen, but whatever. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna accept it.
Again, a little suspense of
Yeah.
your belief.
So, and she's like, well, Ciri, for some reason, you're gonna have to, do the magic and fix the bridge. Again, I don't know why Ciri doesn't question Yen and be like, yeah, why don't you do it?
Right. Right.
But she's like, okay, whatever, I'm gonna teach you and train you, right? So maybe that's the guys. So she tries to teach her, she repeats the words, which she, has really good memory apparently. And she's straining, there's blood coming from her eyes, and Yen's like, stop. But she, gets frustrated, Ciri, and she screams, and somehow they and the horses are teleported to the other side of the bridge.
Mhm.
If I understood correctly, which I totally did not, because I had to just read people's comments to understand what happened.
Yeah, the editing and the positioning of the camera made that a little confusing. It would have been nice to like have that happen and we were with the initial camera on the other side and we see them at a distance in the same establishing shot that we got previously. So it was a little confusing. I definitely agree. It would have been nicer to have, as I said, a mimicked established shot to for the audience to really understand that Ciri did teleport them that distance. But yeah, it's interesting how much Ciri is capable of in such a short period of time, considering she had no idea she was capable of like, I guess I could say traditional quote unquote magic on the continent, outside of her, the magic that she inherited from her mother. Um, but yeah, she does. I think that was like something that did stand out to me on my very first like binge of the series was, dang, she's doing a lot in a really short period of time. Like they have such a long time to develop her magic in the books that that to see it all just to for Yennefer to be like 1, 2, go and push her metaphorically off a cliff. It's again, you just kind of have to just sit there and just take it. I think as an audience member.
Yeah, I guess. So I don't have a frame of reference for the books.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, to me, it doesn't, I'm like, okay, this is just how fast she does it. But one thing I did notice is that she does not have control of her magic. And I think it's actually similar to Yennefer. Yennefer has like this untapped magic. And when she was being trained as a student, a big thing that the Seiya kept telling her is like, you don't have control of your chaos. And Ciri, like, she just screamed out of frustration and she somehow landed them there. So I mean, I think I thought that was well done in that we see that Ciri doesn't have any control and she's just has this power and doesn't know how to use it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so one of the nice things though, this is something that I do think like you can see they're trying to put this theme in. Yennefer appreciates and admires what Ciri just did. And she tells her like she has a very like gratified look on her face. And she says, when you have power like this, never apologize. Right? Which is very much Yen's, approach. She's like, I do whatever I want. Don't apologize for who you are. But you do see that she enjoyed that interaction and that she was like kind of proud of Ciri.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think a lot of it is just surprise at the kind of power that Ciri can wield. Um, there's, we saw in season 1 how much training Yennefer had to go through to, catch lightning in a bottle, to use a flower to lift a rock, and how much consistent practice that she and the other mages needed when they were in school. And so for Ciri to open a portal at the end of the last episode, for her to fix a bridge, blood in her eyes or not, I think Yennefer's genuinely shocked that this is the kind of individual and power that she's dealing with and that she's about to hand over to something quite sinister.
Yeah, and that's what we get to now, which I also think this part did not exactly flow well for me. It wasn't believable emotionally at all. So basically they reached the monolith, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I just have my notes and I haven't rewatched it since I wrote this, which was like a few weeks ago. So they reached the monolith, and the end tells her, if we get separated, remember you have magic, which is kind of like a hint, like something bad's about to happen. So she like is still committed to following through, but kind of wants to be able to protect herself. It's kind of contradictory.
Yep.
Honestly, the end honest is probably full of contradictions. Like she still wants to do it, but she also wants Ciri to be safe somehow. So, yeah.
I think again, Ciri is just like, LOL, I did that. I brought down an entire monolith. And Yennefer's like, oh, I think it's another come to Jesus kind of moment for Yennefer, where she's just like, what the hell am I doing? Like, one, what does this demon want from this child? Two, this is a child that Geralt is strongly bonded to. And three, this is an obscene kind of power. Like, what? Like, I've never encountered anything like this before. So I think it's the kind of thing that I think this is obviously where we do see all of these conflicting emotions and these conflicting motivations and feelings just fall apart, really, because Yennefer suddenly has a change of heart and then Ciri obviously discovers what Yennefer's intentions were in the first place.
Yeah, so the execution also I was a little confused about. She tells her this whole line about magic first. She's like, "It's an arrow, lodges in you, wounds you, it's all you'll ever need." Which, by the way, is Yennefer's like.
That is from the books as well.
Okay, that's cool. And I do think that is reflective of Yennefer's character, because Yennefer has been someone who was powerless and helpless as a child growing up. And she only acquired power when she found her magic and when she was able to use it. So she really relied on that as like a crutch for her identity. And I do understand that's what motivates her, and that's why she feels so helpless without it, because she never really learned to love herself, honestly. She's just, I am my power, and that's all I need. And I have no self-worth beyond my power, and which is tragic. And I think her major flaw, and I think that's very compelling, actually. As much as I think Yennefer is like an incredibly flawed person, but I find it very, very interesting, and I feel bad for her.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because that line and a number of others that we'll see in this section as well, all come from the books. And this is something that Yennefer does tell Ciri, is that like you have this strange relationship with magic that I think we talked about in season 1. Tissaia also alludes to it as well, where it is a give and take with the natural universe that's around them. But at the same time, it's that kind of elation, that bliss, as she says, where you're part of, I feel like, at least the way that I would put it, is that you're part of a greater power. And that you can channel that and you can feel powerful, and you can also, change the way that the world is simply with like your mind and with your abilities. So, but at the same time, you sacrifice a lot of yourself in order to do so. So yeah, it's an interesting take. And I think one that speaks to, yeah, that need for sacrifice in order to achieve something, in the same way that you would have for almost anything else in the human experience.
Oh yeah, 100%. Think about that a lot. So Ciri kind of responds to that, and she's like, she then realizes that Yennefer doesn't have her magic anymore. And she's like, complains, she feels out of control. She says, chaos controls me. No one will ever be able to teach me how to use it. She's like, well, you literally just started. And then she somehow telepathically hears Yen telling her to turn back. And
Yeah.
Please, you can go on. And
yeah, this entire conversation was lifted exactly from the books, in a much different context. Still between Yennefer and Ciri, but in the books, we continually see this dream sequence that happens. Dreams in the Witcher universe, as well as, of course, in Greek mythology and other places, are incredibly powerful. And I think they even say that in a previous episode, like shared dreams are a really powerful omen. Or a mix or cross. I'm crossing my streams with another kind of
Fransesca, Fringilla.
Yes, when they in I think episode 2 or episode 3. And so that happens in a dream. Ciri kind of has this conversation with Yennefer continually throughout the series, and it's this exact conversation, which again, really cool that they're able to lift a lot of 𝘳𝘵𝘗's translated words at least. But it's just a very different context. So when I was watching it, because I could instantly recognize it, I was like, oh, this is an interesting use for that, that it still works. They in the books they kind of talk about like a different kind of door. But here, the editing's also a little weird because it's just like boom, and then everything turns black around them, and it's just Yennefer and Ciri. I think there probably could have been a more successful, uh, I guess, a more successful version of this from a production standpoint. I almost imagine like the void that you see in Stranger Things when Eleven is like is there. Um, but yeah, so we kind of like zero in on Yen and Ciri, and we discover that this is like a telepathic conversation that they're having, and the door that they allude to in the series is now, the monolith or the or Voleth Meir, the path to, I guess, power. And Yennefer and saying that like it's too late for me to not open that door, to not have this conversation with Voleth Meir, to not, channel this greater demon.
That was something
Whereas
that
for
I never understood. I was like, what was Voleth planning on doing with Ciri? Like, I just don't get it. Like,
um I mean, again, this is a completely original storyline, so like and an original character. So at least from my understanding of it, especially with between episodes 7 and 8, is that she just, I think, needs Ciri as basically a battery, in order to do
that's
something else.
adorable.
And as we discover throughout all these 2 seasons, and as Yennefer discovers in in this very short period of time, Ciri is a very powerful sort of battery, for lack of a better word. Um, and yeah, I guess Voleth knows that. I don't know, to what extent her demon powers work, but she seems to know quite a lot of things. And, Yennefer has
Probably
never
trapped
laid
in
eyes on
it.
Ciri. Yeah, so it's a little surprising that she's like, this thing that you've never seen before, bring it to me." So yeah, I don't
Yeah, and
know.
I also don't know how she somehow got to the Temple of Melitele. Like, how did she know she was there?
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyways, you know what I can volunteer for? I will do it free of charge. I would love to read the scripts pre-season 3 and ask all these questions so you can fix it a little bit. Reply. So another thing, so basically what happens is like she's like, I don't understand. She's like, oh, I didn't know who you were. So she's kind of like apologizing for bringing you here. And then she's like, come with me now. So basically, like at the last possible instant, she has like a change of heart. And she's
Yeah.
like, don't go. But then, first of all, I'm like, what is her plan? Because she doesn't have magic, right? So she's like, come with me now. What is she going to do? Like, what is, like, how is that going to be helpful?
I guess, like, take her back and try to apologize, but it's certainly one of those things that then you think, like, "Oh, she would have led any other child to their demise." But because either, 1, she saw how powerful Ciri was, or because she saw that, it was Geralt's child's surprise and she feels some way about Geralt, that, oh, she suddenly had a change of heart. For either of those 2 reasons, but in any case, it's like there's like a little asterisk over the fact that, she would have done this
Mm,
seemingly for with anybody else,
yeah.
but only changed her mind because of the, conflict with Geralt.
Yeah, and I also wish there would have been, it felt very unrealistic because she
Yeah,
goes from like, I'm going, 5 seconds before she's there, she's like, let's go back. But she doesn't, there isn't enough emotional oomph there. Like I don't
sure.
see it in her face, I don't see it in her, like, just give me like a little bit of like scrunchy eyes, I don't know, something like furrowed eyebrows, like show me the conflict. Like it was
Yeah.
calm.
I think I do think that Anya Chalotra is really great. And I will say that I think that Anya, Mayanna Buring, who plays Tisea, I think they do a great job at like face acting because it feels like they come from, a larger tradition of theater, that sort of thing. And so I I think though It's probably less on I would say it's probably much less on Anya Chalotra and the acting than it is on just, as we said earlier, the ability for the storyline to breathe over multiple episodes and to carry that conflict through. The fact that it was kind of compressed into, with everything that happens in this episode, maybe no more than like 15 minutes, 20 minutes for all of Yennefer and Ciri's scenes, I think puts a lot of pressure on the actors to have to sell the story, of course. And so, yeah, I think it just everything happens so suddenly
Mhm.
that I just don't think there's really room for her for Anya Chalotra specifically to really work and to sell the that change of heart.
Yeah, so I never thought it was an Anya problem because Anya is
Oh
terrific
yeah.
at like this super passionate emotion, like her yells and screaming, like she's clearly capable of showing like passion. I assumed it was a directing thing, but they kind of told her to understate her acting. That's just what I assumed because I know she can be very, very emotional and like, ooh,
Yeah.
this part.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's that weird thing of just like, oh well, I wouldn't have kicked this puppy if I knew it was your puppy. And it's like that's I don't know about that. Ugh, that's I don't know, it just feels weird.
Right. And I have thoughts on in terms of episode 8, what happens at the end. I was like, this is the kind of person like that you would want around your kid. But yeah, I talked about that in episode 8.
Yeah.
I would never trust her again. Ever. Ever.
Yeah, which is
As much as I like her, as much as I feel sympathetic, I'd be like, you're too dangerous.
yeah, which is I think something interesting that happens between the books and the show because I guess this is like a light spoiler, but like Yennefer never loses Geralt's trust in like around Blood of Elves. So it's interesting here to see that completely reversed, in which there's an infamous letter, a famous letter that happens in the books, the Dear Friend letter, which is alluded to in the previous episode, and it's Yennefer has a lot of feelings toward and about Geralt, because she didn't hear from him for 2 years after Sodden.
About 2 years.
So yeah, that's a long time for you to not hear from somebody that allegedly cares very deeply about you, that does or doesn't know if you're dead. And then all of a sudden you hear from,
Wow.
or you don't even know if either if either of you are alive or dead. Then suddenly you write me out of the blue, like what the fuck. And so it's the kind of thing that, like, in the books, Yennefer is the one who has some sort of anger or tension, or displeasure toward Geralt, but it's never Geralt's toward Yennefer. So it's interesting to see that reversed here.
Yeah. That is interesting. I know that was a big change because like I said, it's hard to avoid like these kind of major spoilers, but I did know that this whole thing was invented. So yeah, I'm one of those people, like I don't necessarily dislike that they made her just so like such a flawed character. I just feel like if it, like we were talking all the time, it should have been better developed,
Mhm.
and so it'd be more compelling, more realistic, whatever. So now, basically, after Yen has like had the sudden change of change of heart, she Sylvia screams, "I don't trust you," which is the perfect thing to say. And her scream splits the ground, goes straight through Cinderella. Like, man, this girl is so destructive. You know, I remember when I was a kid, I didn't understand how resources were limited. And I was like, oh, if there's a hurricane, just rebuild everything. And I was like, I didn't understand that there's money, there's time, there's physical resources that are limited. I'm like, no, it's hard. Like, so for me, like now seeing that city split, I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna have to rebuild all of that. Like it's not easy. And the sound the alarm, very quickly the Nilfgaard soldiers arrive. Again, some people were like, how'd they get there so quickly? Theoretically, maybe they're around the area, whatever. That didn't bother me so much actually. So,
Yeah.
and then they try to fight them, and then who comes to the rescue? Geralt and the dwarves have arrived.
Yeah.
You've probably read some discussion. There was some discussion about the distance and the travel, and it's very convenient timing, but okay.
Right. Yeah, Sintra is quite far from Kaer and quite far from the Temple of Melilli and Elander.
He wants some
So
Oxenford though, didn't he? Didn't he just go to Oxenford to get Jaskier?
oh, I guess he would have. But even the distance between the Temple of Melilli, because he was left there in the beginning of the episode and then had to go to Oxenfurt and then had to go to Sintra. All of these places are quite a ways away. So It's very convenient for the plot and for the 8 episode structure that Geralt is just here.
So I did hear an interview, I think where Lauren was saying how Thomas Baginski, the like co-producer or executive producer, was like, oh, he was always reminding her about travel times, and she was like, well, we don't have time. Like she just said, we don't have time to show it. Like so,
Yeah.
so they were aware. I get it. So basically they come, right, and they rescue them, they dispatch them with guardian soldiers, and then the last minute there's this like super wonderful dramatic moment where Geralt like puts his sword to Yennefer's throat because he realizes what has happened, and she does have a very repentant look on her face. I thought her face was excellent, where she has this very like sorrowful face because she knows she lost the trust of the man she loves, rightfully so, and she's 100% to blame. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have anything new to say because it really is just that reversal of tension and of anger that we see in the books. So it was interesting to see that play out and how angry, of course, Geralt is given everything that's followed in this episode and the previous ones as well.
Yep. And there's some great lines here. So like he tells Jaskier, go with the dwarves to Kaer and she knows the way, take her there. And which I'm not quite sure how Ciri would know the way. I'm very bad at directions personally. So if you had just schlepped me around the continent halfway through Portal, I'd be like, I don't know where to go.
Yeah, Sintra to Kaer is super freaking far. Like it's really far.
Yeah, and she like walked there with Geralt, and he was her guide, and like she walked out of there a little bit with Geralt, but then they were portaled, like I don't know, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah.
And Ciri's like, where are you going? And he says, to slay a monster, which I was like, okay, to me, I was like, oh, he's referring to Yen, like he's gonna kill Yen. Like I really thought that. I thought he was gonna kill her, which maybe if you'd read the books, you'd be like, no way they're gonna kill her, but I genuinely thought he was gonna do that.
Yeah, I just rolled with it. The storyline is so new that at a certain point I just like, whatever. Lauren has her take the wheel.
Yeah, and then there's also an amazing line where Yarpen's like, the Gatto, I love his accent, he's like, yours? And he's like, mine, girl is mine, which obviously is a big, he says it to Yennefer, like he's looking at her face, he's like, my girl, like you just messed with my girl. And if you remember in the beginning, I don't remember which episode it was in, but at some point someone asks him like, is the girl, yours or something? And he's like, no, this is not my daughter. Like,
yeah.
That
happens in episode 2 with the prostitute. Yeah.
So he's grown. She's now his daughter. It's great.
That is another line from the books as well that Yarpen does ask Geralt. So it was again cool to see that here. Yeah,
it's wonderful. It's great. And the way it's acted, stellar. Like wonderful. It's interesting because like I don't talk too much about the actors like acting, but Henry Cavill, I read this line in a review. They said he disappears into the role, and that's exactly it. Like I never think Henry Cavill, I just see Geralt. That's it.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. That was actually a thought I had this morning as I was watching it. I was like, he's totally gone. Like I can't, in the way that he acts and the way that he speaks, his mannerisms and his physicality is just so specific. And it's clear that he's put a lot of thought and effort into the character of Geralt, which I think is phenomenal.
Yeah. And I've been reading a lot of discussions, and there are a lot of people who rag on season 2 and don't like the TV adaptation, like the original book fans, but like everyone universally loves Henry Cavill. They're all like, he's the best.
Yeah.
So now they apparently when he said to slay a monster, what they wanted to do was Voleth Meir. That's apparently who he meant. So we see that would they go to the house of Voleth Meir somehow? I don't know how they got there.
She said the incantation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. And since the baby elf had just died and Voleth Meir just had her share of pain, they basically see her escaping, right? They see the empty house.
Yeah. The Baba Yaga house just kind of like creeps up and it just stands up and like turns around, and then we just see Voleth Meir just like be unleashed God knows where. And there is that kind of curiosity of like, because they went down into a cellar in like episode 2 or episode 3 or whatever, and then was that like a pocket universe? Was that like a real forest that we saw Voleth Meir in? Like, how does she get out of that and then to Ciri specifically? I guess Ciri's close enough because she's on her way out of Sintra. That's a possibility. But yeah, I'd assumed previously that Voleth Meir was like in a little pocket universe in a crypt. So for her to just kind of like saunter on out to go it possessed Ciri basically, was a little surprising. But yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
I get that. To me, it's just like I chalked it down to a rule of magic I just don't know about. But yeah, I get it. Yeah, it is weird. Like I kind of assumed it was another dimension, but like I don't know how interdimensional travel works. But the truth is, if she would have had the ability to travel out of the dimension, she would have not had this whole story. But whatever.
yeah.
I don't know. Good point. So I did like how he says, you know, now that you reminded me that that's what he says as she did the incantation, he like forces her to say it. He's like, say it, because that was what she said was the betrayal of him. And he's like, say it in front of me. Like, I want you to iterate, to feel that guilt. Like, you did this. I want you to do it in front of me. So
Right.
I thought that was very beautifully done.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're confused about like what happens to her. And you know, Geralt says she shouldn't have been able to escape unless she had her fill of pain and desperation, in which we know that she did. And last thing we see, if I recall correctly, is Voleth Meir entering Ciri and those possessed eyes.
Yeah, it's quite the thing to end on, I think. And as I think especially starting to watch these episodes in isolation, because I'd binge watched them the morning they came out. Like I was done with the series by I think like 2 o'clock.
Wow, I'm
So
impressed.
well, because I needed to assign episodes immediately
Yeah.
after that to new guests, and I had a short production timeline. So for watching it in isolation, though, it's like quite the cliffhanger, though, because you don't know what's going to happen now that Voleth Meir has achieved, something. We really don't know what, for book readers and show viewers alike. And so it's yeah, you get this, and you're just like, oh no, she got what she wanted. So
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and now that we know how powerful Ciri is, we know that she is a very dangerous conduit for Voltmir to be controlling.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I guess what are your overall thoughts on this episode?
So much happens in this episode that we get to see like the political machine on the continent start to move. Rience and Lydia obviously as key players and like pushing a lot of the external storyline. And then all the stuff just between Yennefer, Geralt, Ciri, Jaskier, is there's so much that's packed into this episode. That yeah, I think it's just like setting up that end game, for sure. And so we also start to kind of hint at a lot of what will happen, a lot of setup for season 3, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Because we start to see, I don't think from what I can remember, I don't think we spend too much time with a lot of the other secondary characters in episode 8. But I could be wrong because I haven't watched that one in a while. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of the setup that I'm sure we'll see like politically between the monarchs, the mages, and with like whatever the heck Rince and Lydia are up to, that's I think all set up for season 3 that we get here. So
Yeah, total agreement. You're right. There's a ton happening. And yeah, I don't think episode 8 I think mainly is not focused on the rest of the people. But yeah, there's so to me this episode had like it seemed disjointed at times,
mhm.
but you're right, it's a ton of stuff in one episode.
Yeah,
So it's understandable that's what happens. And
yeah, yeah. I
I've
mean,
seen great ones.
yeah, I think this is definitely one of the episodes that would have benefited from more time across the season with for a lot of these plot points. Meeting Yarpin, like having this change of heart for Yennefer, seeing I think the mage storyline kind of fit, for the like in terms of like the amount of time that it had to make that story. It would have been nice to see a little bit more, I think, of Fringilla noodling on this, but I think this episode did okay with like showing that descent for her. I just think it would have been nice to get a little longer of a storyline for Yennefer and Ciri here.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, and then this episode kind of has some of my favorite scenes, like the moment with where Frigilla kills everyone. I thought it was
Yeah.
very striking. And then Jaskier, so cute. I love him so much. So funny. So I love that. And it was funny and emotional. I thought
Right.
it's probably not easy to strike that and get them both like at the same time and within the same like 2 lines of each other.
Mhm.
So I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, I think with like how tight the script has to be, like those emotional moments and beats and the funny beats have to just be so tight. And I do think that that's a little bit left over from Stokowski's original writing as well, too. Just in that I think even though the characters obviously take the world and their situations seriously for the most part, there's something about the writing that doesn't, not all the time. And I think that that aspect and that humor still plays very well here.
Yeah. And, I have to say, like, this was always, I think the main point, well, I guess this is debated, but a large purpose of movies is entertainment. And it was definitely entertaining, gripping, suspenseful, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. It was really so nice to meet you and to talk about episode 7 together. And it was great. I'm looking forward to listening to all the rest of your podcast episodes as they come out.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot more. I mean, and yeah, of course, thank you again for giving me the opportunity to chat about a later episode on your show, especially that I'm probably not going to get to until like end of summer or something. It's only February, so we have quite a ways away to go with my show, but it's, any excuse to talk about The Witcher is always a good excuse.
Yep, same. I know. I'm like, I find myself, I'm like, so do you watch The Witcher? Can we talk about it? It's fun. I love it. I'm honestly, when I said about the books that I want to get spoiled, I don't know how much self-control I'm going to have to keep myself from reading them, because I really enjoyed the first one. And I'm like, it's just a library hold away, a library reservation away. I'm like, I don't know.
I mean, if you're able to get the audiobooks through the library as well, like they're phenomenal. They're so good, and it's an easy way to just like plow through the series for sure.
So I probably will do it for The Last Wish, but I'll be honest, I don't really retain information from audiobooks. I've listened to a couple audiobooks, and granted I was working while I was listening to them. I didn't retain a thing. I love reading physical books. Like, I don't do Kindle, like only physical books, that's it.
Yeah.
So but yeah, we'll see how much self-control I have if I can not read the rest of the series. But yeah, I'll report back. Well, thank you so much. It was wonderful, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much to my current patrons: Susie, Lady Libras, Lily, Jenny, Haley, Molly, Veronica, Emily, George, Saucy Tuckles, Meg, Anne Rose, Priya, Alexa, Misty, Joanne, Hattie, Imelda, Esther, I'm Watching Good People, Taurus, Papacy, Marie, Emily, James, Jen, Aaron, Jay, Lily, Beckett, Miranda, Christine, Sadie, Kelly, Danielle, Teresa, Mrs. Castaldo, and Carrie. Your support is truly appreciated.